We do that, y'all bow your heads with me. Let's open in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you for this evening. Thank you for the people that you have gathered here this evening and for your holy word. Thank you, Lord, for this church, for the country where we live, where we can freely assemble to do what we're doing right here. We ask that you would be among us this evening, that you would build us up, that you would sharpen us and refine us and turn us into better Christians through the power of your holy word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So there was a theologian, a real young theologian, a couple years ago who wrote a number of books and participated in some debates and really took the internet by storm. And he was a great man with a complete command of the scriptures and infallible logic, and he was really growing and growing and growing in popularity, and more people were looking to him to be the next great Christian leader, that he was going to unite the denominations and challenge the invading religions that were coming into America. And then things were looking great, but then at the height of his popularity, the man just flat out disappeared, and no one knew where he went. There were no videos, there were no announcements, no more debates, no more writings, nothing like that. Just gone without a trace. Until one day, a man who was in the congregation of the church where he was, one of his fellow church members, was vacationing with his family at SeaWorld. And he was in SeaWorld, and he had paid the extra money for his family to go back into the back of the dolphin enclosure, and then his kids get to feed the baby dolphins, the cute little baby dolphins. And when the time comes and they go around to the back of the enclosure and they're ushered back there by some of the attendants, who does he see? But this great theologian there, dressed in a jumpsuit, hauling around buckets of fish for the baby dolphins. And he says, "What happened to you? Man, you're here of all places. No one had any idea where you went. You were supposed to be this great leader, and you were going to unite the church and do such amazing things for the faith. And now I find you here in the back of a dolphin enclosure with a bunch of baby dolphins hauling around buckets of fish. What's going on?" And the man sat down his buckets, and he paused for a moment, and he said, "Well, it may not seem like much to you, but I still feel I'm serving a youthful porpoise. It's getting harder and harder, y'all. I know. Well, no one knows the struggle. Jokes for a Bible study. 2 Samuel 19. Looking at the first four verses. Y'all remember where we're at. So 2 Samuel 18. Well, this is a short little recap here. Absalom has died. The battle, they were discomfited. They fought in a battleground so only a small bit of ways removed from a very, very dense forest. And in that battle, it started to turn in the favor of King David. And in that, everybody started turning around and running back into the forest. And then the Bible says that there were more men lost to the forest that day, lost to being struck down while running away, and actually lost to the perils of the forest that day, than actually died in the battle. And in part of that, Absalom, with his long, elegant, flowing hair, got his hair caught in the branches of a tree and was hanging suspended above the earth by his hair. It doesn't say specifically by his hair, it just says hanging, but it doesn't make any sense that it would be by his head or by his neck or anything. It's just by his hair. And Joab, David's general, gets word that he's over there hanging around. He goes over there, he takes 3 sticks and runs him through. That doesn't kill him, but then he has all of his servants, all of his squires go over there and finish the job. And then word makes it back to David, and a couple people want to go and tell him, one in particular, but Joab says, no, this is not good news. You don't want to be the one to deliver it to David. And then he calls up another servant. He says, you go tell David. And they had a foot race of sorts to get over there. But it's bad news regardless. Whenever they get to David, he goes into mourning. It's Absalom, Absalom. Would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son. And that's where we pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 19. So we're going to be looking at the first 4 verses here. And it was told Joab, behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people, for the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. And the people gat them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. So Joab again, David's longtime general, been with David thick and thin for years and years here. He's also the general who skewered Absalom as he was hanging from a tree and then had his servants finish him off. So Joab gets word that King David, even though he was victorious and had won the day, and even though Israelites, people in service to David, had died in service to David in that battle, that King David was unconsolably weeping and mourning over the death of his son who betrayed him, his son who chased him out of Jerusalem, out of the capital city, chased him off into exile, and then went on the rooftop of the palace and defiled his father's concubines in front of God and everyone. David was mourning over a man who all of his subjects now considered to be a villain. He's crossed a few lines, and some of them you just don't cross. Someone who's done remarkably evil acts. And the fact that Absalom was David's son carries no real weight with the people that have been chased out of Jerusalem with King David. They've all been turned out of their home. And David spoiled their victory with his mourning. Now, partially because they genuinely cared for David. He's their king, and they're hurting along with him. They are empathizing here, and partially because of the ingratitude, the complete ingratitude that it showed on the part of David to have no consideration for the people who put their lives on the line, while David, if you remember, was told to stay in the confines of the city. He didn't want to, mind you. He said, I'm going to go out there and lead it, but they said, no, you're worth 10,000 of us. You stay in the city. So while he is in safety, they're out there fighting for him, and instead of this triumphant procession back into the city of Mahanaim, the people slunked back. You know that word, slunk? That's what the Grinch uses. Slunk. They've got their tail between their legs. They're quietly and calmly and in utter depression almost, making their way back to the city, the same way that people would return to a city if they had met their enemy and had been forced to retreat. They're returning to the city with no joy at all. And David continued on in deep mourning with his face covered, crying out Absalom's name in a loud voice, despite the toll that it's obviously taking on his people. Verses 5 through 8. And Joab came into the house to the king and said, Thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life, and the lives of thy sons, and of thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines, in that thou lovest thine enemies, and hatest thy friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and all we had died this day, then it had pleased thee well. Now therefore arise, go forth and speak comfortably unto thy servants, for I swear by the Lord, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one of thee this night, and that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befell thee from thy youth until now. Then the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told unto all the people, saying, Behold, the king doth sit in the gate. And all the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. So again, this is a continuation of verse 1. It's saying Joab got word that this happened. And you get a good look at it. It's another side of Joab's character here. He's a gruff general of sorts. I mean, he's somewhat manipulative, and we know that he's a war fighter, and he's a no-nonsense guy, and he's vengeful. He took vengeance over his brother's murder here. He's thrown his weight around in the past. When he killed that guy in revenge in the gates for the murder of his own brother, he kind of strong-armed David even into letting the incident go. He never got punished for that murder, even though it was wrong, because he had the backing of the army, and it said David didn't want to go against him and test the loyalty of the army between him and Joab. He was also, though, the one who orchestrated Absalom's return. You remember, he saw that the exile of the king's son was affecting the king, that he was thinking on his son Absalom all the time, being off in exile there. So he's the one that set all of those wheels in motion. And here, though he understands what David is going through, he comes at him with this tough love. It's a very direct kind of no-nonsense wisdom that he throws at David and says, you need to snap out of this morning like right now. If you're going to maintain the bonds between the people you love and the people that love you, you better get up and snap out of this. So Joab, he gives David a little bit of it's straight talk, and it's the kind that a servant wouldn't be talking to David this way. Someone new to the army wouldn't be talking to this way. This is the kind of straight talk that only a general who has known and served the king for a long, long time would be able to get away with. As he looks right at the king and he says, you have shamed these people. You're shaming yourself. You're shaming these people. They went out there to risk their lives to save you and your family and your concubines and your throne, and you are showing love to your enemies and hatred to your friends in the way that you are acting. And he says, it seems to me that if Absalom had lived and everybody else had died, that'd be the only thing that would actually make you happy here. If all your loyal subjects had given up their lives, but you had Absalom, then you'd be happy. So he says, get up and speak to your people. Show them you appreciate them. Speak comfortably to the people. And then he says, I swear, David, they're not going to even stay with you through the night. If you can't bring it upon yourself to get up and present yourself and thank the people for what they've done with you, not a single one of these guys is going to tarry around. They're not going to wait around for you until the morning. You're going to wake up in the morning. You're going to find that maybe you are a king, but you're outside of your kingdom and you have no subjects all of a sudden, and that's going to be real, real bad for you. And David listens, and he heeds Joab's advice, and he changes his clothes, and he sets himself up in the gate of the city. And word spread that David was in the gate, and in a procession of sorts comes out from, they've all gone to their tents, and they all come back, and they're presenting themselves before the king to acknowledge the king, to be thanked by the king, to be acknowledged for their victory. And it's a formality of sorts between the two of them, but it's what everybody needs. Verses 9 through 14. And all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us out of the hand of our enemies, and he delivered us out of the hand of the Philistines, and now he is fled out of the land for Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now therefore, why speak ye not a word of bringing the king back? And King David sent to Zadok and to Abiathar the priests, saying, speak unto the elders of Judah, saying, why are ye the last to bring the king back to his house? Seeing the speech of all Israel is come to the king, even to his house. Ye are my brethren, ye are my bones and my flesh. Wherefore then are ye the last to bring back the king? And say ye to Amasa, art thou not of my bone and of my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab. And he bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word unto the king, return thou and all thy servants. There's a lot goes on in those verses here. The rebellion's been crushed, and Absalom is dead. So when it says in verse 9, all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, this is talking about everybody else. All right, so King David and Joab and all of his people have been chased out across the Jordan, out into exile to a different city. This is saying that all the rest of Israel, all the other tribes, were at strife for all of this happening. Absalom had won their hearts by politicking, pressing the flesh for a number of years, but he had taken things a bit further than a lot of people had anticipated, and now he's dead. So all the people back in Israel are starting to look around at themselves and say, man, King David defeated our enemies. He saved us from the Philistines. Now he's been chased out of Jerusalem, and Absalom is dead. Why haven't we brought David back? Why haven't we formally reinstated him as king? Why aren't we trying to get David to return? And verse 11 says, the speech of all Israel is come to the king, even to his house. That means word of the people wanting David to return had made its way back to David, who was still living temporarily in Mahanaim, because he couldn't just come back and declare himself king. They had to reinstate him. He was going to be anointed again, more or less. So David sent messengers to Zadok and Abiathar, and that's the two sons, or the two priests. I'm sorry, those are not the sons. Those are the two priests that he stationed in Jerusalem to spy on Absalom and all the goings on, and then they would tell their two sons, who would be runners back and forth between his camp here. He sends word to the two priests, and he says, you guys need to talk to the elders of Judah and see if the return of David has the support of the elders of Judah, because apparently the word on the street is that all the elders want David back, but Judah hasn't yet shown its support to reinstate David as king. And that's, yes? He is. They haven't yet. When Absalom declared himself king, he did it in Judah. Right? Remember that he took the officials, and he told King David, I'm going to go do a sacrifice. And he said, you go ahead and do it. He promised you would do it. So he took all the officials over there, but he did that in Judah. And so Judah would have to be in on that at least a little bit. In Hebron is where he did it. But Absalom as well would have been from the tribe of Judah, because he's so. They're a little reluctant, maybe out of shame. We don't really know. Absalom probably had a good bit of support in Judah for that to have gone down at all. And now that he's dead, the elders of the tribe are a bit reluctant to bring David back. Now, David, of course, was of the tribe of Judah. He tells them, are you not bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, and whatnot? And that's him saying, I'm of your tribe. Why are you guys holding out? We should have taken care of this already. And then David, through the priest, sends a special word to somebody named Amasa. And if you don't remember the name Amasa, don't feel bad, because we've only heard it once. Amasa was David's nephew, and he was the guy that Absalom appointed to be his general. Back in 2 Samuel 17, it says, and Absalom made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab, which Amasa was a man's son whose name was Ithra, an Israelite that went into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister to Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So David tells Amasa, we're family. And they are. There's his nephew. It says, we're family. And then he tells him, I have decided to make you general over my army in place of Joab. That's what he's saying in verse 13 there. And he tells the priest, y'all go tell Amasa, art thou not of my bone and of my flesh? God do so to me and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually instead of Joab, in the room of Joab here. Now, why is he telling him that? It doesn't come straight out and say it, but by now, I can imagine, one, word of how Absalom was killed has reached David, as a lot of people would have seen it. And to top it off, David recognizes just how overbearing Joab has been. So this is a move to get Joab out and to gain the loyalty of what remains of Absalom's army, because they weren't completely wiped out. David has his own army's loyalty, but there's still that splinter group that was sided with Absalom, so he's going to take their general and replace Joab with him, and then he'll get rid of this overbearing guy who killed his son. Now, is it a wise move? Maybe, maybe not. This guy, Amasa, is probably not as good a general as Joab is. He's not as old. He hasn't been doing it near as long. His loyalty is unproven. He was just made the general for the rebel Absalom. And to top it all off, Joab, I doubt, is going to take this news very well at all. And that's in the next chapter, but Joab's not the sort to take that kind of news sitting down. Regardless, David's message, whatever he said in it, swayed all of Judah, and they were all in accord to bring him back to Jerusalem and reinstate him as their king. Verses 15 through 17. So the king returned and came to Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to conduct the king over Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, which was of Bahurim, hasted, and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. So David and his men and the representatives of Judah, they meet in the middle. They meet more or less at the Jordan. David and his entourage come to the Jordan, and the elders of Judah come to Gilgal, which is on the west bank of Jordan, in order to greet David and send a ferry over and escort David back and forth over the Jordan back into the city of Jerusalem. And who do we see come down with the elders of Judah? Shimei. Shimei, the foul-mouthed, stone-throwing, political activist guy who took it upon himself to cuss King David and his guards and all his people as they left the city of Jerusalem dejected. He was throwing stones at the king even though he was surrounded on all sides by his royal guard. 2 Samuel 6, 5-6. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the family of the house of Saul was just coming out. His name was Shimei, son of Gera. And as he approached, he kept yelling out curses. He threw stones at David and at all the servants of the king, though the troops and all the mighty men were on David's right and left. This guy bet on the wrong horse. And he hasted and came down with the men of Judah. And I bet he did, because there is no hiding. All right, the tides of this war have turned completely against how he thought they were going to. So he hastes his way down whenever he hears that David is coming back to Jerusalem. But he didn't come alone. He gathered all his family, 15 sons, 20 servants. The 15 sons and 20 servants of Ziba. He gathered all his family and 1,000 men of Benjamin. And taking 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, that's not a show of force. It's not meant to intimidate, because he's not going to intimidate here, because David just won a battle. What's 1,000 guys going to do to a king with an army? It's to show David that Shimei has used his influence to gather as many people as he can to come and flock to David's banner in a show of support. It's him trying, it's more like a peace offering of relationships to King David. He's trying to show that he's back to being useful. And among those people that he brings are Ziba, who was the servant of the house of Saul, the man who lied about Mephibosheth. And we remember that. We'll review it in a little bit here. Verses 18-23. And there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. And Shimei the son of Gera fell down before the king as he was come over Jordan, and said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me, neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. For thy servant doth know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai the son of Zeruiah answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? And David said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be adversaries unto me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am the king this day over Israel? Therefore the king said unto Shimei, Thou shalt not die. And the king sware unto him. So before David could cross over, so we're on the eastern side of the Jordan, Shimei took the ferry over, and he falls down on his face in front of King David. And he says, King David, do not impute iniquity to me. Please, let's forget the whole thing. I messed up while you were coming out of Jerusalem. I pray the king hasn't taken it to all these foolish words that I said. I pray you haven't taken it to heart. I know I have sinned, and I've come this very first day of your installation. I'm not hiding. I'm not denying anything that I've done. I have come out to confront my transgression head on and more or less to beg the mercy of the new king. And Abishai is the same guy who looked at David in 2 Samuel in 16 and said, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. Abishai, which you just got to love, he's the one who responds when this guy lays himself out in front of David, and his feelings on the subject don't seem to have changed. Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? Abishai doesn't like this dude. And David responds, and I think it's the most respectable, like John Wayne kind of stoic way that a man can respond to somebody publicly cussing him like this, and then coming up and begging for forgiveness. He says, what do I care about the sons of Zeruiah that I would let them get in my way today? I'm king. My kingdom has been restored. You people are squabbling and taking offense over name-calling when a kingdom has just changed hands, and I'm not marring this day by executing someone for their foolish words. He's above it all. He even seems slightly annoyed by the situation. He looks over at Shimei and he says, you're not going to die, I promise. Now go on out of here. Stop wasting my time with this stupid stuff. I know I'm the king. You couldn't do anything to me back then with your words. You can't do anything to me now. I promise I'm not going to kill you. It's like he's an ant, and David just has declined stepping on him and said, you go about and do your insignificant ant stuff. Verses 24 through 30. And Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. And it came to pass, when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said unto him, Wherefore wentest not thou with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for my servant said, I will saddle me an ass, that I may ride thereon, and go to the king, because thy servant is lame. And he hath slandered thy servant unto my lord the king. But my lord the king is as an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in thine eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet didst thou set thy servant among them that did eat at thine own table. What right therefore have I yet to cry any more unto the king? And the king said unto him, Why speakest thou any more of thy matters? I have said, Thou and Ziba divide the land. And Mephibosheth said unto the king, Yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. So right after David deals with Shimei and says, Go on, get out of here, you're not going to die, someone else approaches the king. It's Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is the lame son of Saul, who at 5 years old, when they were trying to escape the Philistines, his nanny, whoever was taking care of him when he was 5, was holding him, dropped him, and he became lame in both feet, crippled in both feet, and now he can't walk at all. And the last time we heard the name Mephibosheth mentioned, it was Ziba, the servant, talking to King David while King David was heading off into exile. Ziba brought David a whole bunch of raisins and figs and bread and wine, and they was on 2 donkeys, and he said, This is for the whole company here. I wanted to pitch in, hearing that y'all are in exile. And when David back then asked Ziba about his master, Mephibosheth, Ziba told him in 2 Samuel 16 that Mephibosheth had stayed in Jerusalem in hopes that the revolt of Absalom might fail and the throne would be restored to the sole remaining heir of Saul, Mephibosheth. So the servant lied and said, well, Mephibosheth has his eyes on the throne. He thinks things might work out there, so he stayed behind. And so at the time when King David heard the lie, he looked at Ziba and he said, you know what? All the lands that belong to Mephibosheth now belong to you. But look what's happening here. Mephibosheth shows up. He hasn't washed or trimmed his crippled feet, or trimmed his beard, or washed his clothes. From the day that David was chased out of Jerusalem until this day, and we're not given a specific amount of time, but it seems like it's been a few months. So this guy looks ragged. Mephibosheth has been in genuine mourning for David and the house of David this whole time. And when he shows up in this disheveled state, David asks him, where have you been? Why didn't you show up and go with me? And Mephibosheth says, well, Ziba lied to me. I told him to saddle a couple donkeys with supplies so that I could ride out to meet you. But the dude took those donkeys and he left before I could hitch a ride. He took all the supplies, and then he lied about it and left me back in my house. And he says, I know Ziba lied about me to you, but listen, my king, you're like an angel in my eyes. Your judgment is righteous. Do whatever is good in thine eyes, because he says, my father's house was dead before you showed up. We were like dead men before you. You had the right to kill every last one of us, and you didn't. You took me from this wasted house, and you sat me down at your own table. I don't have any favors left that I'm going to ask you. You've already been way too nice to me. I don't deserve any of it. What I have received from you, I didn't have a prayer of earning and didn't deserve any of it, so I'm not, whatever you decide, I'm with. And we don't know exactly what arrangement is meant by what David proclaims here. It may be a complete reversal of David's command in 16:4, where he says, all right, to Ziba, he says, everything that was his is now yours. Or they may now be returning to that formula, or something like half the land, like half and half, because what was happening was Mephibosheth owned all of it. Ziba worked it all on behalf of Mephibosheth, and Ziba was getting a portion of it. Now it might be 50-50 between the two of them. We don't get all the fine print on the contract that David's putting out right here. We don't really know what's going on. But Mephibosheth answers David whenever he says, y'all split the land between of you. He says, yea, let him take all. For as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. And it's not him saying, no, here's a counter offer. It's an admission from Mephibosheth that what he really cares about is the king. He says, you two work out the land. He says, I don't care about the land. You're back. And that's all I care about. I'm just so glad you're back. Whatever we work out with the land, that's fine. I don't really care. It's a small matter here. And it's amazing to draw all these parallels between King David as a type of Christ. And you see the parallels all the time. People in larger Bible studies that focus on David and the parallels that you see in his life here. Just in the passages we've read here, David, on his way out, is cursed and berated by those who thought he would never return. If they were making fun of him on his way out, in humility, thinking, well, this king's never coming back. And here a man is happy to give all of his material, temporal wealth because he sees the king has returned, and he's able to be a part of the kingdom far beyond the wealth that the king has assigned to his stewardship for a time. He says, no, the king is back. What do I care about all this stuff? I can't even work this land. I can't do anything with all this, and it's only by the king's grace that I had any of it to begin with here. I don't care about it. I care about the king's return. So even in just this one chapter, we see some of those sharp parallels that you have between David and the overall symbolism of a Christ.
Well, David's trying to be a gracious king, right? Don't come back in being petty and small-minded.
Yeah, well, he's learned a lot. This has been a humbling experience, I imagine, for him, though. Remember, in the exile from Jerusalem, when he's marching up the mountain, he's the only one that they say was barefoot. It's like a self-flagellation kind of thing. He is inflicting pain on himself for the shame that he's brought on his family, the punishment he's brought on his family, because he knows every bit of this is divine judgment for his own lustful sin, that God looked at him and said, the sword's not going to depart from your house forever. And now he's seeing that play out. So he's been knocked off his high horse, and when he's coming back here, yeah, he's got a bit more of a humble take on what it is to be king. 31 through 39. And Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rohelim and went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old. And he had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. And the king said unto Barzillai, come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said unto the king, how long have I to live, that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old, and can I discern between good and evil? Can thy servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voices of singing men and singing women? Wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden unto my lord the king? Thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, and why should the king recompense me with such a reward? Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I may die in mine own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and of my mother. But behold thy servant Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. And the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good unto thee, and whatsoever thou shalt require of me, that will I do for thee. And all the people went over Jordan, and when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned unto his own place. So we had Shimei, we had Mephibosheth, and now here comes Barzillai the Gileadite, and this is somebody that David would have been very happy to see. Barzillai, he's this old, wealthy, generous man. And we first heard his name when David was searching for heirs of Saul. He said, I've got a promise to keep that I made to Jonathan. I need to see if there are any heirs of Saul to which I can show kindness. They found Mephibosheth in the house of Barzillai. And Barzillai, this old, rich, generous man, was taking care of a crippled rival to the throne. What?
Barzillai is an old man.
Yeah.
I'm fixing to be 80.
Yeah.
Barzillai is 80.
They refer to it here as fourscore. When we start counting it in score, when we start counting it in groups of 20, I'd say you can drop the O word. Come on. You're not going to make me feel bad about that.
It's making me feel good.
Because I'm right behind you.
Oh, good.
Maybe we're focusing on the wrong thing. this maybe. Well, I mean, this guy, we've heard about this guy before, right? The crux of why this guy is such a good guy and so memorable. He was the one who was taking care of Mephibosheth when David was hunting for heirs to Saul. And the reason that's such a big deal is not only because Mephibosheth is crippled and can't earn anything that he's doing, can't earn any of the generosity that's being extended to him, can't pitch in around the house or anything like that, he's just a complete burden. More than that, he's an heir to the throne and a rival king is coming in. Barzillai is inviting trouble, inviting it to come down here by housing heir to the throne that has just been deposed. Because any king coming in would seek out all of these people that might raise up an army, have some kind of claim to the throne, and kill them. That was standard practice whenever a throne would change hands, something like that. And not only would they kill them, but to find out that somebody was housing them, feeding them, defending them, taking care of them, that person's neck might be on the chopping block as well. So Barzillai was going way out of his way, putting himself in harm's way to extend generosity to somebody that couldn't do anything to deserve it or pay for it. And then, when David was actually in exile in Jerusalem after Absalom took Jerusalem, Barzillai is the guy in Mahanaim that was funding everything, feeding the troops, taking care of everybody. So David tells Barzillai, come over Jordan with me. I'm so happy to see you. Come over Jordan. Let's both go back to Jerusalem, and I will have my turn to take care of you. And I'll feed you at my table. You've fed me enough. You've taken care of all enough. It's my turn to repay the favor. Barzillai, despite this being a great honor, he looks at King David and he says, I am 80 years old. I'm 80. If I go to Jerusalem, how long am I really going to last over there before you're being saddled with making funeral arrangements for me? He says, I'm 80. I'm going to stay here because I'm not that sharp anymore. If you shower me with fine food and fine wine, I can't taste it. If you try and entertain me with the nicest singers in the land, I can't hear them anymore. If I go, I'm only going to be a burden to you. I've done my duty. That's all I've ever done. I didn't expect such a reward from the king, and it would be wasted on me. So let me go back to my own city and eventually die there so that I can be buried with my mother and with my father in the place that I call home. And then he says, but I've got my boy here, my son, Chimham. take him with you. Let him go, let him serve you as I've served you. And David said, you know what? That doesn't sound bad at all. I'll take your son with me, and I'll do to him exactly as I was going to do to you. Whatever seems right, I'll repay that generosity. And when they crossed over, he kissed Barzillai, and he blessed him, and he said, you go on home. Verses 40 through 43. Then the king went on to Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah conducted the king, and also half the people of Israel. And behold, all the men of Israel came to the king and said unto the king, Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen thee away, and have brought the king and his household, and all David's men with him over Jordan? And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, Because the king is near of kin to us. Wherefore then be ye angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all of the king's cost, or hath the king given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, and said, We have 10 parts in the king, and we have also more right in David than ye. Why then did ye despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? And the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. So this is interesting. King David, along with Chimham, crossed over the Jordan. They arrive at the city of Gilgal. And as it turns out, the tribe of Judah, who were the last people to voice their support for King David's return, apparently didn't tell everybody else that they were going to go get David and bring him back. They didn't break that news to the other elders of the other tribes about what they were intending to do. So when David returns, the whole tribe of Judah is there trying to work their way into his good graces after this revolt, but only some of the other tribes are gradually showing up as they get word about what's happening there. That's what it says. All the men of Israel came to the king and said to the king, Why have our brethren stolen the way? Where does it say half? It says half of them showed up. Half. I'm not going to find it in there, and I don't want to read every bit of it in. But only some of the other tribes of Israel are coming in. So we've got most all of Judah putting their best foot forward, but then everybody else is kind of trickling in, and they're angry about it. So when David arrives over the Jordan and the word of his return has finally reached everybody, and the men of all the other tribes of Israel have been gathered, they go to King David and they say, Why has the tribe of Judah stolen the king away? Why were they the only ones given the privilege of escorting the king? And the men of the tribe of Judah say, Hey, he's of the tribe of Judah. Why would you be angry about this? He's one of our own. We aren't mooching off his table. We haven't received anything off of this. This wasn't to enrich us. This was just because he's of our tribe. We haven't seen any profit from this. But the elders of the other tribes of Israel aren't having it. And they said, We are 10 times as many, because they don't count the tribe of Levi. And there's 12 tribes of Israel. And we got Judah. And they're saying, We are 10 times as much of a stake in this as you are. We are 10 tribes, and you are just one. We have more right to restore the king than you do. And more than that, it was our idea, and you were the last one on this bandwagon. While you were sitting there thinking things over, you have despised us in this action. And the men of Judah answered the whole of the Israelites with even fiercer words. They're saying it heated up. Things got heated up. They went back and forth, and they escalated a bit, and they should have all been on the same side. But this thing was tearing them apart, and it leads to a good bit of trouble in the next chapter. So you have a reason to come back next week for 2 Samuel 20. Any questions? No? All right.